think we're live.
Oh, are we live?
Connor, I think we're live.
Hello.
When you go from the show about the start screen to two handsome young men, I
Two
believe
two
that means
very
it's time.
handsome and very young men.
I believe it means it's time to get started. Let me just set the table for everyone, Connor. I'm Vince La Rosa. You are Connor Kalopsis. We
That
are
is right.
part of 110 football. Some people would say the best parts. Some people would say the worst parts. We're not quite sure, but you'll learn from this who you like most. At the end of this, you will pick between Connor and I. But what we're here to do today is talk about Steve Cherundolo is the new LAFC head coach. I know a lot of you guys have opinions, so that's why we couldn't wait. That's why Connor and I are. I'm in lovely Long Beach. Connor is at his home. Do you
Where's my
want to share
home?
where? Yeah, do you want to share where your home is, or you want to keep that private? Yeah, I know you have a good understanding.
No comment.
No comment. Good, good. You're learning. Connor is at his home. We're going to have some other special guests, but like I said, we're going to talk about Steve Cherundolo. If you found us because you're following us on YouTube, awesome. You guys are great. We love you. If you came here because you're on Instagram or Twitter, go ahead and follow us on YouTube so you get alerts to when we're doing things like this. We're going to do more of them throughout the season. This obviously is a very big one. Connor, I want to get your initial thoughts on Steve Cherundolo taking over as head coach for LAFC.
Well, this is I mean some of the biggest news LFC has ever had. I think this offseason in general has had probably some of the biggest news LAFC has ever had in its history. So this is one of the major events that has happened this offseason. I'm very excited that Steve Cherundolo is joining LAFC. I think there's a little cautious optimism. There's a lot of question marks, but there is also a lot to be excited about. Change is good, and I think the LAFC fan base for the past year #Bob out, #Bob out. We want a new coach. Well, guys, here's your new coach. So, I mean, if you don't like it, would you rather Bob be back? I think you guys were the ones who when I'm gone. Anyway, I'm very excited to talk a little more in depth with you. What do you think?
Cautiously optimistic is good. That's okay, right? Look, anytime you change a coach, it's a risk. There's no slam dunk. I mean, maybe, okay, Pep Guardiola shows up, Jurgen Klopp shows up. They weren't coming, though, guys. So this is something that's always going to be a little bit of a risk. You know what I'm most excited about? And not to say anything against Bob Bradley's personality. I personally am on the record of saying I really like Bob as a coach. I really like him as a person. But these two character types are very, very different. And I'm interested to
Very
see
different.
how players, especially younger players, react having 4 years of a guy like Bob Bradley, he doesn't stop. He doesn't quit. He's soccer all the time. He can wear you out. He can wear you out, but in some ways that intensity players like.
He can wear you out, especially after 4 years. Keep in mind, if it's the
Yeah.
same tone, same message for 4 years, not just players get sick
Right.
of it. So,
And that's not
hi
to say
Max.
Steve. Hi, Max Bretos. And that's not to say Steve is not intense, but I think he goes about it in a slightly different way. So I'm very interested in that. But I like where you're going with cautious optimism. There's people with a lot of questions. One of them being, why did it take so long? I think we're going to try to go over all those things. But I think before we do, let's kind of take a look at how Steve got here,
Let's do it.
where Steve came from. If you're not aware of who Steve Cherundolo is, where have you been? Where have you been? I mean, the guy was a star for the U.S. national team. It's not going out on a limb to say that Steve Cherundolo is the greatest right back in U.S. national team history. He maybe not. He probably won't always will be as this new crop of youngsters come, but for a while he will be. He was part of 3 World Cup squads, only played in 2. He was injured in the 2002 World Cup. And then he was a guy that one of the forefront guys in going to Europe. Germany in particular, and Hannover in particular. Steve Cherundolo is known as the mayor of Hannover. That's how much they love him. They love a guy born in Chicago, grew up in San Diego, went to Hanover, and they're calling him the mayor of Hanover. That's got to mean something, guys. So that's something that I think is interesting about Steve's journey. But from there, stuck around in Germany for a little bit, got his coaching badges in Germany, learning under the likes of Ralf Rangnick, who, if you know that name, is now the head coach of Manchester United. He says he spent some time with Jesse Marsch as well, another name that is very interesting to people. So it just on the fact alone that Steve Cherundolo has his badges from UEFA is a change, because their style of teaching coaches how to put a game model together and their emphasis on certain things is going to be very different from Bob Bradley and a lot of different candidates that might have come from Mexico or South America. Not better, but different. And so Steve comes to us with that wealth of experience. Obviously, we'll get more into his coaching with the Las Vegas Lights because that's his first head coaching experience. But from there, he was high on the list, and John Thorrington has decided, after meticulous search, that this would be the guy. And speaking of the guy, I want to bring in two guys that are going to help us along this way. Not just any guys.
Some good guys.
Some great guys, well-known around here, and they're going to help us talk it through it because I think we need a lot of different personalities in this chat because I'm sure we have a lot of different personalities in the actual YouTube chat. So I'm going to bring them on. Defenders of the Banc, JR and Philly are joining us. Here they come. What's up, boys?
What's good, everybody?
Well, we have a coach. Is it – wait.
That's what's good.
When you have a pope, is it the white smoke or the black smoke?
It's the white smoke, right? Habemos papam, right? Now we have a coach.
We have white smoke. We have white smoke. We have a coach. I need to get your guys' initial thoughts. I want to start with you, JR. What was on the top of your mind when this news came out?
All right. So clearly we have a lot of people that are going towards his record as the Las Vegas Lights head man last year, right? And if you do that, I think you're already poking around in the wrong place, unfortunately, because we can talk about why the Las Vegas Lights didn't work and why that was the whole thing. But what I think that we are seeing right now is we've got a guy who has all the potential in the world, no actual results as a head man for a top club under any league. He's got, you mentioned all the great experience that he's got coming up through the ranks, but what we have right now is a lot of potential. And I think that in the city of Los Angeles, that can be a relatively dangerous thing, where this is a city that doesn't normally hire on potential. We bring in the Phil Jacksons and the Joe Torres and the huge names, right? When we're looking to fill, especially managerial head coaching vacancies, things like that. But all I will say is this: if you look at the Sean McVays of the world, or if you look at the Brian Schmetzers of the world, who came up without a lot of previous head coaching experience and the amount of success that they have had so far, I think this could be something that we are looking at 5 years, 7 years, 8 years down the road thinking, wow, we didn't see this name coming, but look at what we have now from what could have been before.
And let's be clear, not a lot of direct head coaching experience, as in he wasn't the head coach, but spent quite a lot of time with both teams, club teams in Germany, youth setups, the German national team setup. So he has an idea of how to do this. So look, you never know you can do something until you do something. We'll talk more about Vegas Lights, but I want to get Philly's initial take.
What's going on, fellas? We're talking about something. I'm still trying to realize how the heck I got here. Vince, you're starting to look like Tom Selleck with that mustache. There are very few people that can rock a mustache in this world. You might be one of them. Obviously, we're talking about Steve Cherundolo. Well, I love Steve Cherundolo, the player. Very much so. We happen to walk the grounds of Germany together at the same time. Germans don't necessarily care for non-Germans. So for, like you were saying, for them to nominate him the mayor of Hanover, that speaks loudly in terms of his character. As a player, we don't need to go into the accolades because we know the dude's a certified badass. As far as a coach is concerned, though, I look at it this way. He's got a UEFA Pro license. Very cool. He's been an assistant within Hannover 96, VfB Stuttgart, the German U15s. Like, he has that. But to me, it's like the guy gets his driver's license and now he's behind the wheel of a black and gold Ferrari. I'm not going to be cautiously optimistic about this. I am going to be cautious because what we had with Bob Bradley was a tenure of success. 14 years coaching in college, nearly a decade in MLS, MLS Coach of the Year, US Open Cup, MLS Cup, 7 years with the national team. First American in top flight in Europe, first American Premier League. Bob had respect. Getting Bob, we were excited. We knew, all right, this is a really good signing as far as our history goes. With Steve, we've got a badass player that doesn't have much coaching experience. And from what we've seen in other sports, being a badass player isn't necessarily going to translate to being a great coach. I'm looking at you, Michael Jordan. But at the same time, I'm not here to burn the bridge down. I'm not here to burn the bridge down because, I want the guy to succeed. We all want the guy to succeed. But to say that I'm glass half full, I'd be lying to you. I'm cautious this time around, which goes beyond my character.
Okay. Hey, I want you to be honest with me. So I like that Philly's being honest. I think we're not going to, at the end of the day, we're not going to get any answers here, right? The answers are going to come on the pitch. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about how Steve can be successful on the pitch. But I like that we have at least one person that isn't on the optimistic side. So, and also he speaks a little bit of German. I enjoy more German from Philly. I enjoy that. Okay, Philly. So I want to go into what we think are maybe the positives, but because you're so on the fence, I want to hear maybe a little bit more about what you think is the greatest positive about hiring Steve Cherundolo.
The greatest positive is, the potential to have some German talent brought into LAFC. That's what I view as a huge positive. I would like that. I look at it this way. He's a guy who, as personality-wise, and you were talking about this earlier, far different personality than Bob. Steve is a very likable guy, a player's coach, if you will. So from that perspective, I can view that as a good thing. And change can be good, although change is definitely challenging. What I like about this is, we have a new face to the team, and I mean, I'll leave it at that, man. Like, there isn't enough for me to be really excited or to view like a massive positive. Yes, he's had tenure within Europe. The UEFA license is fantastic, but just because you can drive on the Autobahn doesn't mean you're going to do well on the 405. You know what I mean? Like, that's sort of the way I'm looking at things. There's probably a lot more positives that I'm not thinking about, but the only thing that can make things positive is success on the field. And that's what I think needs to happen. Do I think it's going to happen right away? No, I don't believe so. But if he takes the ship, turns it around, shows some wins, we're obviously going to get some new players on our roster at some point in the season. If they can execute and score in that final third, which is something we had a tough time doing last season, I think these are going to be all things for improvement. We got to see some changes in personnel. Goalkeeper still remains a situation that cause for concern. The big hole Edward Atuesta leaves a cause for concern. So do I view a lot of positives right now? It's tough for me to say, given the body of work that I've seen in Las Vegas.
JR, do you want to take the Vegas, or do you want me to do it?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I want to forget about Vegas. I mean, do we even know, by the way, Vince, you're much more connected to the team. Do we even know that Vegas is a thing for next year? I've heard a lot that it was only a one-year thing.
Vegas is indeed confirmed for next year.
It is, okay.
But maybe we should give some people's perspective on what exactly Vegas was last year, because I don't think a lot of people know exactly what was going on in the background.
Sure. And real quick, can I answer the first question first? I think Connor hit the nail perfectly on the head with what he was talking about earlier, where after 4 years, that same type of message from Bob in the way that he delivers it, right? That can be a little grating on a lot of players. I think we saw that, to make other comparisons, we saw that with the Angels with Mike Scioscia, right? They were an incredibly successful team, but the message got kind of stale over the course of his, 12, 15 years that he was the manager there. I think that we heard as kind of around the club, around the periphery a little bit, a lot of little things in the locker room about, maybe, Bob doesn't quite have the ear of the younger players. He doesn't quite understand younger talent or how to develop it. Things like that. I haven't had any firsthand knowledge of any of that stuff, but when you see a lot of small smoke, and not the white smoke of having a head coach, but the small smoke that we were hearing over the last couple of years, I think that the most optimistic thing for me about all of this is clearly that the message is going to be different for a lot of these younger quality players that we're looking to develop. And I think that could lead, I think even Steve said it, right? If we can make these players 5% better each time they take the pitch, if we can make these players believe in themselves a little bit differently, see themselves a little bit differently, play for the crest as hard as the supporters who support that crest, I think that's something that we're looking at with the Steve Cherundolo hire. Now, Vegas, that was a whole nother different dumpster fire. Look, I think we can all agree, right, Vince, that Vegas was about getting these younger players, these players who wouldn't find time in the 11 or even the 18, finding them some footing, finding them some run in a system that was very similar, or was supposed to be very similar to what we were running at LAFC. I think that there were a lot of things that don't work with the way that they're running it, loaning out guys 24 hours ahead of time and not really getting a lot of cohesiveness and creativity. Yes, I know they all practice and play together at the Performance Center, but it's a whole nother different animal. I think that for people that are judging Steve Cherundolo on Vegas, you're not looking at the glass all the way around like you need to.
Well, I mean, I'll piggyback off of JR. The Las Vegas Lights roster was a Mickey Mouse roster in a way. That wasn't a team set up to win the USL Championship. That was a team set up to give younger guys a lot of playing minutes at a level that was reasonable, so to expect probably one of the worst rosters in the USL that isn't set up to compete at that level and expect this head coach to have a positive record isn't too good. That being said, you can't completely discount that record. That's a very bad record. So that's why, like I said, I'm a little cautious because, there are some positives for me in new voice in the locker room. The identity won't change. LAFC's kind of structure won't change under Trundle. But, with that head coaching record and maybe lack thereof head coaching experience, I'll just reserve my judgment until, let's say, June.
Look, I'm optimistic for this reason, and you can take what you want from Vegas. I do think you should take lessons. You should always take lessons from anything, whether it was not a good setup or not. Vegas's roster was on the low end of spend. It was very young. It was not set up really to compete. It was set up to play games and to kind of bleed some of these guys through and to find out what you kind of had there. And I think just with Mamadou Fall alone, you're finding little things that you didn't know you had until now. I think Mamadou probably doesn't play as much if Eddie Segura is injured, but that's another story for another time. So Steve, not set up well for Vegas. And again, to reiterate the setup, they trained in LA. They didn't really ever have a home game where they would travel. They would have LAFC guys sprinkled in, no continuity. I think, honestly, if you could ask John Thornton if he could go back in time and not give Steve Cherundolo the Las Vegas Lights job, he would have. However, the plus side, the optimistic side of that is, and the reason why I say he wouldn't have, because if we're talking about Steve Cherundolo coming straight from Germany and not having stopped with Las Vegas, I think at least from outward appearances, I think fans would be a lot more excited, right? He'd be kind of a mystery, right? He came from Germany and he's been there for a long time. He did stay in a lot of coaching ranks and learn from a lot of coaches there. So I think people would have liked that. But the fact that Vegas soured them, I get that. Now, the flip side of that is he got to be here for an entire year. So he's not finding his way around LA. He knows the stadium. He knows the players. He knows the academy now from inside and out, not just his second team with Las Vegas Lights. So these are important things. I think that, again, it won't matter if you don't perform, but I do see some optimistic things in some of the things that people are setting aside as more pessimistic things. So that's what's kind of interesting.
And I will say, Steve Cherundolo also knows the fans. He may not be a diehard LAFC fan from the beginning, but if there's anyone that could relay that feeling of passion that the LAFC fans in the 3252 has, it's him. So I'm excited.
Philly wanted to jump in. I know, and I know you can talk about Steve relating to fans having been in Germany and what the connection between Steve being an American in Germany and being able to connect so much with Hannover, which in a lot of ways their support is a similar setup to the way we try to set up our support. So you can maybe comment on that a little bit from Steve's perspective.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the supporters play a very big factor in Germany and for all the clubs, not just a club like Borussia Dortmund. Hannover 96, big supporter base. I mean, a lot of supporters' culture comes out of Germany. And for an American to relate there and be beloved by the supporters there, again, that says a big thing. And that says a lot about the man. He was captain of the team. I mean, again, another big example. As a person, I have no doubt that he would charm the pants off of all of us and the 3252 simultaneously. So he has that down. The player-coach aspect thing, he has that down. And you brought up a couple of good points. I think that him being in LA for the year, getting to know guys like Carlos, works to his advantage because now they're chummy. They have a relationship together. So I feel like with him being the head coach now, it's good that he had spent that time. I think it would have boded very negatively for him if he would have come out of nowhere and the players like, all right, who's this guy? What's going to happen? Like, they know him. They have a relationship with him. But that, to me, begs the question. If he'd been around for a year, He's been around all these different places. You see him at Party Beer Co., the training facility. Was this a move that, was thought of beforehand? Sure, we had a vetting process. Sure, a lot of the big names that we were told were interviewing were fabricated media stories. But it leads me to believe that, well, this was a plan that was put into place for a much longer time than any of us had any idea about.
Look, John Thornton's a long-term planner. We all know this. I don't think he expected to need Steve Cherundolo. I mean, no. Honestly, did any of us expect the team to miss the playoffs?
No, not at all.
I know a lot of people can say that, the team's been bad since 2020, but come on. Look, almost everyone makes the playoffs in MLS. And if this team didn't have the injuries it did, I think I could have brought them to the cusp of the playoffs. Bob had to deal with the injuries on top of the fact that he had players that wanted to go along. This roster is still pretty good, and the core of it is still very good, assuming it is healthy. So that is what's interesting to me from that perspective. I do think, but I kind of agreed with you, Philly, when I said, like, look, if they could have gone back in time, they wouldn't have put him with Las Vegas Lights. However, you got to get him in the fold, right? Who knows if you waste another year where Steve's not part of the setup, where he's going to be, because he is a highly sought after candidate. And I think he was spending time in Germany. I'm sure somebody might have taken a punt on him. And there definitely would have been other MLS jobs. I think, remember when he got here and we hired him for Las Vegas Lights, and then the Atlanta job became available and everyone was like, oh no, Steve's already going to leave. Maybe people don't remember that, but I remember quite a few people getting very anxious about them poaching Steve Cherundolo from us. So those same people, I'd be curious what their thoughts are now. There was some questions that were coming through, and we'll get back to kind of more of our thoughts. I think one of the questions that our producer put up there was about LAFC fans if it doesn't go right early on. I think there's a bunch of LAFC fans that doesn't matter. Here's a question from GTG Law. The question is, if the season starts off bad, how long will Steve be given a chance to build this team into a contender during the season? I give him until summer. I don't think the fan base will wait. I agree with you. I think a lot of the fan base has already made up their mind. Remember, in MLS, for better or for worse, you are really in it until September. I mean, there's almost nothing you can do besides being FC Cincinnati to really shoot yourself in the foot. Connor, you are my spirit animal when it comes to like the despair that LAFC fans can feel at times. You definitely went down that rabbit hole towards the end of the season. So I want to hear what you think about that question. Will he be given the time, or should he be given time? Should we be skeptical right away?
I mean, the same thing could have been said about Bob Bradley, right? I mean, we started having the question of when things started going south last season of, how long will we give him? And if he does resign, like, how long does it take? And it turns out he didn't resign, so that question doesn't mean anything anymore. But, from a fan's perspective, yes, come summertime, if we're doing really bad, like wooden spoon contender, then you have to start pointing fingers at him or JT again. That being said, just from a kind of team standpoint, is it really worth it getting rid of a head coach who you just signed and finding someone else halfway through the season? I don't think so. So I realistically, I don't see LAFC getting rid of him until next season if things go south. But from a fan's perspective, I think if things don't go wrong, if things do go wrong, fans are going to be upset no matter what. Yeah. Like after every result. Yeah.
Right. They're upset already. And a lot of the upset is with what comes next. I think the roster build is going to be very important. And that runway that you give Steve to make sure that he can be successful is going to be very important. But I want to bring in the voice of LAFC. He's raring to go. He's wanted to be on the chat since we started. So he's got his camera ready. Max Bretos is going to join us. Oh, here we go. There he is. Max, the beard that launched many beards at ESPN.
Correct. This is a fascinating story that I would tell one day, maybe in a podcast form, but I won't bother you with it now. But, it took a brave soul to bring beards on air, and I was that guy at ESPN, and I would like that to go down on the record.
Well, we started this chat with people talking about my facial hair, so I figured we just keep it
heard that.
Yeah, you did.
Anytime there's a mustache, and I'm guilty of it too, Philly, we go straight to Magnum PI. We don't go to who else?
There aren't many people that can rock a mustache and look awesome.
There's a very famous person who rocked a mustache we never bring up, but the most famous mustache, involved in World War II. That's the most famous mustache.
Yeesh.
And then Magnum P.I. is second. I don't want to bring it, but that's like when you think of mustaches, you think of that guy.
I think
Ted too, Max.
I'm not going to compare Vince to that man. No.
What about your guy?
I was going to say, I think Ted Lasso
had a great mustache back then.
Ted Lasso. Yeah, Ted Lasso's getting up there. That's actually that's a good shout. I mean, if you're thinking of 5 most famous mustaches, Lasso's got to be creeping in there, just based on the phenomenon these last 2 years.
Max, I got to stop us. So this is not the Max and Vince podcast. We've totally just done.
No. I need one more stash. I need one more stash.
Okay, one more stash, and then please, I need to know what you so desperately had to jump on here for.
Burt Reynolds.
Steve Cherundolo.
Burt Reynolds.
Yes.
I said Burt Reynolds. It's an FSU alum.
Yeah.
I know. How could I never remember Burt Reynolds? I went to classes in the Burt Reynolds buildings in Tallahassee.
You may not be welcome back to Tallahassee.
I may not be. I gotta mind my T's.
Okay.
But
all right, Max. Well, give me your initial thoughts on Steve Cherundolo. I know you know him very well, but are we missing something here? What have we not added to this to the story yet?
Just from a personal aspect, it's is it better if I go horizontal?
Probably.
There we go. Sorry about that.
The more Max, the better.
From a personal aspect, I'm thrilled, and I know I talked to you about this, Vince, is the access, Steve. We had about 3 interviews with him last year, and he was very forthright and honest. And I'm not saying Bob wasn't. Bob, by the way, for the record, anytime we asked for him to appear on one of our content plays, he did it. And, there was bad days, and he still did it. And I can tell you, working in this business, that doesn't always happen. There's places where I've worked at or been involved with where I've been asked to leave the practice facility while they're practicing so they don't see it. So I appreciate, Bob was open doors for all of that and very welcoming. So it is Bob. It's Bob that you have to kind of go, at his pace. And I think with Steve, it's been more back and forth, which is going to be nice to see how that comes out with regards to on our content plays. But I learned a lot from Bob, and I'm excited to learn a lot from Steve, and I think that's the part that gets you going. And I mentioned this on the call last night that many people on here were probably on. Is I remember looking for something to grab onto with regards to Americans performing in Europe, and the list was really short. And Steve Cherundolo was at the top of that list. Yeah, there's guys who had more illustrious careers in a shorter amount of time, like Clint Dempsey and Claudio Reyna. But when you're looking at tenure and how he parlayed that into coaching and getting all that coaching experience in a concentrated amount of time, this is number one with regards to the European experience. No one can touch. I mean, you talk to folks who supported Hannover and still support Hannover. I've ran into 2 of them, and they light up when you bring them, because that's the first thing I'm going to bring up. Hey, what about Steve Cherundolo? I go, oh, yes, the mayor. Oh, yeah, he's fantastic. We miss him so much. He doesn't have to pay for any drinks here ever again.
Any chance for you to do your Dieter impersonation there?
Yeah. If he were here, he would support Borussia Mönchengladbach.
Okay, so we're talking around Steve and what
I didn't answer your question.
No, we're not. But let's take this question. I think you can jump into this because you did bring up something that we were a part of. Connor, unfortunately, you weren't there for it.
I was going to get to answering your question though. So
okay. Well, you'll answer it here. We were a part of Steve's introduction to a lot of supporters, which John Thornton was a part of. Larry Berg was on the call. Larry Friedman was on the call. Richard Roscoe was there. It was a chance for Steve to kind of say, "Hey, I'm Steve Cherundolo. Here's what I'm all about," and for people to ask a few questions. It's pretty cool. It's pretty unique. I know a lot of people are probably thinking, why wasn't I a part of it? Well, keep showing up, keep going to events, keep being a part of 3252, and one day you will be on that call. That's all I can say. But it is still a very cool thing. I think there was close to 100 people on
No one does that. Vince, I've never been anywhere when they've done it. So when they pitched it to when Rich and those guys pitched it to me, I go, are you really going to do this? That's amazing. So I've never really been part of something like that. It was really cool.
Well, so this question comes through because what Steve did do is talk a little bit about what football he actually wants to play. He did give us some concrete details, and I think we can share some of that with you guys. So question, Steve has a cool resume, but let's forget about his Las Vegas Lights record. Fair. And let's be honest, is he really the coach to take us out of a bad year, optimism aside? I will start with this. The first thing that Steve talked about was transition play. And I know I'm going to get a little soccer nerdy here, but in Germany, they are all about the transition play and about pressing and about winning the ball back and how you can create opportunities as quickly as possible when you do that. That made me really excited because, man, we were garbage in transition play, both offensively and defensively. Not quite as bad defensively, but offensively mostly. Look, this team was a monster. This team is a monster with the ball. But, man, when you can be good with the ball and also just a monster in transition like they were in 2019, where basically it was win the ball, pass it to Carlos, and then next thing you know, Diego Rossi's on the back post and you're scoring a goal. That is what MLS is built a lot on. And Steve said that. He studied MLS since he's been here and said, look, a lot of big chances in MLS. I think he had even a percentage that he put on. I don't want to misquote him, but he had broken it down in percentage and said they come in transition. And the one thing I want to do is make this team better in transition. So for me, that's not just optimism. That's him concretely saying, this is one of my first tent poles. I want to be good in transition. And he did go back and say, look, I know you want us to be good with the ball. I'd say this, be good with the ball, be even better in transition, and you're going to be explosive, just like a Liverpool is or just like a Man City is. The best teams are good with the ball, but they are devastating in transition. So I will say, from my perspective, that's where I think Steve can thrive because he's already seems to be onto something and has really studied what went wrong. Max, I'm going to come back to you so you can kind of answer the question. What are you taking from this? And to kind of answer that question, what's Steve going to do that's different?
Well, when he explained that, and obviously he didn't really get into the tactical looks. He didn't put up a lineup card or anything like that, which he shouldn't. I mean, he's just starting the job. That's very information to be privy to down the road. But he immediately said transition. And that, like you, it clicked into my head. And then he also said, we're going to look for people that can help us in that process. So, I mean, that is, they'll be looking for those guys that can carry, that can make those quick movements from one position to the next to get that team into attack mode as quickly as possible. And you keep in mind where he's coming from. And as you said, the German system and just these, revolutionary, really, ways to approach the game, approach a style of play in Germany, which are producing the best managers in the world at this moment. When you look at the top jobs, you have Jurgen Klopp, you have Thomas Tuchel, you have Julian Nagelsmann, Marco Rose, who there are in the Bundesliga, obviously. But, England's best managers aren't coaching in England, but the best German managers are coaching in Germany. Hansi Flick. It's a long list, and every time you look at the Bundesliga, it's very avant-garde with these tactics because of this thing that has started. And Steve Cherundolo has been right in the mix of that, and transition's obviously a big part. So at the very least, we're going to expect a very exciting way of play, and there is usually attached to success when you see what some of his counterparts have been able to do. So I was you, Vince. I love it when he said that right from the jump, and it gave you an idea. It gave you something to walk away with what this team's going to look, and you start putting the pieces that we have and start thinking of some pieces that we don't have, but we've been told we're going to hear about very soon and how that's going to look.
He also said one of his favorite players was Roberto Baggio. And I know a lot of people think I have a lot of biases. My only bias is Roberto Baggio. So he can do no wrong in my eyes by saying Roberto Baggio.
Wait, can I jump in, Vince? One other thing is people were worried about the moves that were being made by LAFC with regards to Bryce Duke, to Juri Shroudy,
and
Escobar.
Now we know somebody's been around for all those moves,
yes.
Hasn't he?
You probably touched on it. I'm sorry if I did, but you now know that somebody was there overlooking that as well, saying, yeah, I sign off on that. Because at the very least, a week ago, when these moves were 2 weeks ago, Steve was on that list and within close proximity of the club, so that it would be naive to think that John didn't bounce some of these things off of him.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to you, Jerry. I'm gonna flip this to you because I want to take one of these comments that kind of were talking about this, saying, why did it take so long? That's why everybody's upset. So I want you to comment on that. The other part of that comment that person had was, it took so long, and then John said, we're going to have a good coach. Steve is not a good coach. How do you know that? It's what have you done for me lately? Jose Mourinho is a very good coach. What does he keep doing everywhere he ends up lately? So I would say that your record doesn't necessarily always just make you a good coach. But JR, go ahead and take over from.
I think that's the toughest part, right? We talked about how Connor is the spirit animal for the LAFC fan base. I think what the LAFC fan base is asking right now is, if it was Steve Cherundolo from the beginning, this in-house candidate that we've obviously had for over a year, that John Thorrington knows very well, that knows our system very well, the optics of it are the toughest part that what a lot of LAFC supporters are dealing with today, right? The fact that it took 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 weeks, the fact that regardless of whether or not the names were valid or not to be dangled about, right? Like Turco and Osorio and all these others, the optics of it make it look like maybe this was LAFC's second choice, third choice, fourth choice, and it wasn't until a coach turned them down or until they couldn't get, a name in the building that they wanted. And I'm not saying that's the case at all, and I'm not saying that's how I necessarily feel.
The flip side of that is they hire him right after Bob gets fired, and everyone says, "Oh, you're not going to talk to anyone else?"
Right.
So
right.
You're not going to make people happy.
You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And I think the biggest thing is, like we mentioned it, right? LAFC supporters, within 30 seconds of this being on Twitter and it being announced by the club, already had their mind made up, right? It was either, oh, okay, that wasn't the name that we were thinking about. Let's wait and see how this plays out, or burn it all down. There's only those two different opinions right now on Twitter, right? I think that's all we're going to see. I think that's all that you'll see for the next couple of days. And the hardest part is, going back to what we were just talking about, there's so much change that's going to happen with this club, not just within the next 6 months until that July transfer window, but the next 6 weeks, getting this roster ready, replacing the hole that is Edu Atuesta. I don't think any of us are playing keeper, but I also don't think Tomas Romero is either. So we're going to have to see what we do at keeper. We've got so many more holes to fill. And how much of the initial first 10 games, 12 games or whatever is going to be blamed on Cherundolo, when it's also the fact that we're still putting so much more together in this roster for the upcoming season.
Well, speaking of the roster, I want to go to Victor Lopez's comment. He says, hot take, Steve Cherundolo will make Raito a double-digit assist and scorer. I'm just going to throw that up. Who wants to take it?
No, get out of here. Brian Rodriguez is so far, too far gone at this point. It's like that's something that
gone from LAFC, or gone from double assist goals and assists.
Yeah, gone from being a good footballer.
Oh,
yikes.
No, hot take. You guys want hot takes? I'll give you a hot 21.
Take. Yeah, no, it's fine.
We've given
I
him
like the hot
3
take.
years.
I agree with the comment. I agree.
You might be right.
You might be right. Okay, JR agrees with the comment. Connor's garbage. Philly, what do you got?
Raito, no. I think he gets out of here even before he gets halfway close to it. I know we've been wanting and waiting for Brian, but at some point, if you're evaluating a stock, right? Sometimes you expect this appreciation to go up, but every once in a while you got to go, this sucker's not producing dividends. I need to cut my losses.
I agree with this comment. Brian Rodriguez could be a great male model.
Yeah. Speaking of stocks, you see Tesla today up 13%.
Oh, jeez.
All right, man.
Apple at a 52-week high. My Amazon stock's doing fine. This is a great day in terms of stocks to open up the new year.
I just want to say to anybody in the chat trying to take any advice from Max Bretos, always do the opposite of what he says. The Bretos curse is always the opposite of what he says. So if he's saying buy Tesla, sell it all now.
I don't have any Tesla stock. I think, by the way,
Max, I think you and I are kind of with Philly. I don't know if he's going to be here that long. However, the nuance of it, although we're not sure if Uruguay is going to make it to the World Cup, is it bad for him to try to jump in the summer, then not play for a little bit, then try to catch on with a new team to get into a starting spot in a Winter World Cup? Shouldn't he just stay through the summer?
He probably should, and this is going to it could potentially be an interrupted season because he's still a big part of Uruguay, and they have some massive games because I don't think they're going to make it based on what the form they've gone, which a World Cup without this Uruguay team is pretty stunning. So it's going to be all hands on deck. They got a new manager as well, in former Inter Miami manager, is correct, Diego Alonso. So he's going to obviously want to be a big part of that. And there are some international breaks here in this World Cup stretch. I mean, in the MLS schedule that's coming up. But if he does play well, and I saw some comments here as well. They flashed up really quick. I didn't see who said it, but Brian Rodriguez really was one of the better players for LAFC last season. It seemed like he checked in, and I imagine there's going to be a good relationship. Maybe it's a better relationship with Steve Cherundolo. It should. I think I'm optimistic it should start out well. But if it starts out well, then he's going to be in the eyeballs of a lot of these big European clubs who are already prodded around. If you've seen what was happening, if you get a loan spell, that's going to happen. Look what happened to Daryl Dike, loan spell, and then he's off to West Bromwich Albion. So granted, his loan went a lot better, but if he plays well, he's going to be in the eyes there. If he doesn't play well, he's not going to get those double-digit stats. So I would stay away from that, to be honest.
Right.
Hopefully he plays well.
So what happens next, right? This is now, the appointment has happened. This is kind of just the very beginning, right? This is shovels in the soil. Now we need to really start to see some movement. And I think we will, but I want to get your guys' take on what needs to happen now for Steve Cherundolo to be successful as the new LAFC head coach. Let's go with Philly. Philly, I haven't heard you in a hot second. So let's see, what do you got?
I mean, as far as changes need, I mean, we've talked about them a couple of times throughout the course of this broadcast. Obviously, we need to address the goalkeeper situation. That's the thing that needs to be determined sooner rather than later. We have to address the hole that Edward Atuesta leaves. We have to repair what happened in the final third. We have to execute, and to execute, we need guys who can put the ball into the back of the net. So a couple of splashy signings potentially on the horizon, and John Thornton giving Steve the pieces that he needs to improve this team are greatly going to help. Are we solid on all fronts? I mean, getting Eddie Segura back is certainly going to help beef up that back line. But obviously, we need to we need to make sure that we're deep enough to protect whoever the new goalkeeper is going to be, and need to make sure we put goals in the back of the net. And I'm really, really confident that Chicho Arango, despite who is leading the charge for LAFC, he's going to find the back of the net more times than not. Had he had an entire season within MLS, there's no doubt in my mind he would have been the Golden Boot leader. But if we can get another person that could find the back of the net so we don't have to rely on Chicho. Obviously, you have Carlos Vela as well. We can't discount that. But, those are some of the pieces that are on play. With everybody being upset with the new hire and whatnot, I feel like a couple splashy signings, some solid veterans who have experience that could help lead these young guys. I think that's going to help quench and nullify any anxiety that we may have going forward. But, again, it still needs to all come together. And I'm going to stay to my words. Like, regardless of what we talk about here, I'm going to stick to my ground that I'm cautious this season. And the only way that's going to change is if we start winning.
Philly, just to mention as well that John Thornton's been pretty explicit over the last month, the times that we've had a chance to talk with him. He's not said we're looking at players. He said we are bringing in players. He said the word tinkering when we did the podcast, but if tinkering, right after he said that, he had 2 players go out, 2 come in.
Yep.
It could be big tinkering in the way of the support roles. I expect it to be pretty noisy here in the next week or so, just based on what I've heard. I don't know anything specific, but it's going to come in fast and furious, and it could be big names. It could be those middle of the pack names that can fill an important gap, an MLS veteran, a player from overseas. I'm excited waking up every morning, getting on the computer or getting an email and see, hey, this is happening.
Yeah, I mean, look, John said tweak. I know a lot of people did not like that word, but in his mind, he thinks of it as there's either tweaks or there's overhauls. And he's like, we're not overhauling because I've got Chicho. I've got probably Carlos. It seems like it may be even more secure Carlos with this coach hire. Who knows? I've got Sifu. I've got an Eddie Segura. I've got Janela. I got Jesus Davanrio. He's like, I've got a spine of a team. I just got to put a few more pieces. But he hasn't been shy in saying we're definitely bringing in those pieces. And Escobar and Trezori Shroudy are 2. I'm excited about those ones even before they hire a coach. But again, Steve's been there the whole time now too. So Steve, I'm sure, was helping scout and look through all these players. Yeah. And it's kind of cool that, look, regardless of where you stand on whether it was going to be Steve the whole time or not, if he's been in the room for these conversations, the continuity is there regardless, even if they move to somewhere else. I feel like if it wasn't Steve, he wouldn't have left the organization. But that's just me. JR, changed the initials of your name to JT. What are you doing then?
Look, I think you guys are all saying the same thing, and that we're stocking the cupboard next, right? And I think that what that means is actually even a little bit more long-term than we're talking right now. Max, you mentioned that the next few weeks could be real fast and furious. But I want to bring up 3 other names. What about Chofis, Brian White, and Chicho Arango? We saw 3 players completely change the trajectory of their team's fortunes throughout the entire rest of the year that were brought in towards the back half of the season. I mean, Chicho Arango changed the course of our entire season. Look at what Brian White did for Vancouver. Look at what Chofis did for San Jose. We're talking about a lot of things to get us up to that kind of July window, right? What we could even see happen for LAFC after that window opens up is more huge names coming in, real game changers, real season changers for this team. I think that we have to stock the cupboard and we have to do it right. And I think that what fans or supporters are most worried about right now, is we're seeing young guys like Bryce Duke kind of leave the fold due to trades with Miami, and we're seeing a lot of flux in terms of the core of our roster. So I think that what we need to do, what's next? Goalkeeper. Oh my God, we need a keeper, and we need one of those keepers that we put back there and we don't think about it anymore, right? We had 3 keepers last season, which means we had no keepers last season. It shouldn't be, oh, we're playing the hot hand, or this guy's doing better, whatever it might be. No, I want a Matt Turner. I want a Stephen Fry. I want an Andre Blake. I want a Sean Johnson. I want a Pedro Gaese. I want a keeper that I can put back
time, right?
What's that?
You can only play one at a time.
I only want
JR,
one of those guys.
you know what
Just
I want?
one.
I want an MLS Cup.
Okay.
Sometimes it doesn't work out that way.
You need a keeper first.
Then what do we?
Scarf wants Gigi Buffon.
Gigi Buffon is not allowed into this league.
Connor, what pieces are missing then? Because everyone wants that MLS Cup. A lot of people are talking about fixing Kim Moon-Wan. Obviously, the midfield is a work in progress. What are you doing next?
Well, I just think it's not black and white. This isn't. You can't. In MLS, you just can't build a definite roster that will definitely win MLS Cup. You know what I mean? Sometimes you make it to the Western Conference Final and you have a bad day and you lose to the Seattle Sounders in a record-breaking season. That's just how it happens. Quite frankly, LAFC could build the best roster and have the best coach and have the best season ever and come up short and not win MLS Cup. All I'm saying is we can just maximize our chances to do so, and if we don't win it, we don't win it. I still love this club. I just want to say, though, you guys asked for Bob to leave. He left. You guys wanted a new coach. We gave you – I'm not you guys specifically. I'm generalizing a lot of
I just thought you were looking right – I was looking right
No, I was
there.
looking exactly at you.
Yeah.
You guys wanted a new coach. JT gave you a new coach. I'm not saying – you can disagree with John Thornton's thought process, his way of announcing and signing this new head coach. But one thing I do know is John Thornton is not stupid. There's a reason this club is where it is today, and a large part of that is due to John Thornton and the team he set up. I just want to say that the best thing we can all do as supporters is support Steve Cherundolo and, get behind this team that is still being built out. You know what I mean? We're not just going to go into the season not make any more changes. Like, all right, here's the coach. Well, let's wing it. No, there's a lot of changes to be made. Let's support this. Let's go into the next season swinging. And then, we can call for his head if results don't go our way come the middle of the season. I just think, we're maybe expecting a little too much from everyone across the board.
Oh, we lost Max. Or is he back?
Oh, he got some snacks.
You get treats? Of course. What my take on this is that John really needs to do to help Steve transition well. Max, that's so loud. Last season and the last couple of seasons, the roster always seems to go in flux. And I know, JR, you mentioned that you can make big improvements in the summer. And I think LAFC should always keep that flexibility. But I really would prefer that John kind of dials in a lot of stuff. And he seems like he is of the mind to dial in stuff early to give Steve that biggest runway. Because, like I said, the biggest thing that he had going against him at Las Vegas Lights was not knowing who was going to be on the team, who was going to be there week to week. I think Steve needs to have really a lot of not just the core that's already there, but those extra pieces that we're talking about. There has to be at least one midfielder coming in. There has to be goalkeepers for sure coming in. I wouldn't mind seeing another winger, depending on what Steve prefers, if he wants to play wing backs or with the 4-3-3. But give Steve the most you can now. Leave a little in reserve, but really kit him out now. Give him that chance. Because one of the things we heard on that call was talking about the expansion draft. And they really wanted to avoid an expansion draft next season to give Steve that chance to say, look, no matter what happens.
That was a cool answer, Vince. That
Yeah.
was really good.
Think about it.
He would say that to us.
Yeah, it is a cool answer, and it's interesting. And I know people might be like, well, but why? We lost Tristan Blackman. And I like Tristan Blackman. But I like this because you guys I don't think we quite grasp what it means each year to go, okay, you guys are protected. Guys, we don't really want to lose you, but just so you know, you could be gone. And I think that that's something that you don't want to go through with a young coach. Give them a team and say, guys, if you want to be here, you're here. Let's do this. So I think John really needs to get some business done early, make sure that we go into that first game of the season with a lot of it in place so that Steve, like I said, can have that runway as long as possible.
Yeah, and by the way, that tells you a lot about how thorough these clubs are. And I know most of them are very thorough, but to think I'm going to make this move so that I can give this coach a second year to really ramp up without worrying about losing players in an expansion draft. I was like, right on. That is putting your coach in a position to succeed. It's a small thing, but it's something.
And Vince, I think that comment that we just saw flash by on the bottom about pressure, I think that what we are seeing right now too is that maybe, I don't know how you guys feel about this, John Thornton's job security is kind of tied a little bit to this coaching hire. I think that John, another thing that we heard on that call last night, right, is that John really thinks he got the guy, right? This is someone who John really believes in. And I would want nothing more for a coaching candidate, for a coaching hire to be someone that the front office completely believes in. I think what we're seeing now then is just a little bit of his job security kind of being tied to this particular coaching hire. The reason why I say that, the third DP hasn't always gone well for us with Andre Horta, now Brian Rodriguez, and
John
some of those
that
bigger
on the call.
moves.
He definitely attested to
he
that.
talked about that, right, on the call.
Yeah.
And so I think that John is kind of putting all of his chips into the table a little bit. I think the pressure is still on both Steve and John, but I think the job security is far less an issue for Steve Cherundolo right now than it might be for John Thornton. Just something to think about.
I think one more thing, though, I can share from that call before we kind of move on, that like we said, John Thornton, Steve Cherundolo came on a call with about 100 supporters, just kind of introduced themselves and really gave us where their minds are at, what they're thinking. He has no set formation, right? We all sit here. We remember the 4-3-3. Remember the changes we had to make this season. He is about roles and starting points and getting the right type of players in there. I loved when he said, look, if we're going to play with Carlos Vela, your job is to get Carlos Vela on the ball 30 yards from goal 5 to 6 times a half, looking up and wondering, can I score or can I slip a pass through? And if you do that, it doesn't matter what formation you play, you'll probably win games. And I agree with him wholeheartedly there. I like that he's open-minded in that regard. But like we said, this is kind of just the first steps. We've talked about what we want to see next. The next steps are Wednesday. Steve Trundle will be presented to the press in a press conference. I believe, Max Bretos, you will be hosting that press conference at Banc California Stadium. And then hopefully Max Bretos and I will have the guy, the man, the myth, the legend, Steve Cherundolo, join us. He is a friend of the pod, has been on the Max and Vince podcast before, and is a good dude. So hopefully we can get him and we'll put out a Steve Cherundolo podcast. I don't know if I'm going to make the mistake of asking people to send in their questions early, but if you want to send nicely some suggestions of things you would like to hear Steve talk about, I think Max and I will do our best to collate them all together as we do, and we will ask them in our own way. However, we will try our best. But just look out for that Thursday Max and Vince podcast coming out with LAFC and 110 football. Guys, do you have any final responses? Final thoughts? Max, I know you're eating all that candy.
Yeah.
What's that? I'm going through all these gifts that were given to me for Christmas and just decided to eat them. I felt great today. I had a bit of a purge. Feel good.
Can't wait for that crash from that sugar high.
I know. I shouldn't be eating that, but I was doing pretty well.
Anybody got any hot takes? Daniel Angel says Bob didn't make a lot of changes. Oh, now it's on the screen. But it's back. Mostly tinkering until the end of the season. He was changing everything and throwing Hail Marys. Yeah, I agree with some of that. Not really. Look, Bob did the best with what he had. Look, if you lost Carlos Vela, you lost Eddie Segura, you'd be tinkering a little bit too. But go ahead, Max.
No, I was going to say I saw some questions about how they're going to line up. And as you said, that is there's a style that they're going to abide by, but the formation, it could adjust. We've seen a lot of stuff with the wing backs as well that could be part of what's going to happen here. I think that's going to be really interesting to see how we get that information over the next couple of weeks.
Maxing and snacking. That's a good way to end. Unless anyone else has,
see that.
Unless anyone else has some good hot
that has Juan Vargas is the man. Juan Vargas is a great follow on Twitter. I mean, laugh out loud funny. I got to think of some ones that I've read from his Twitter account that just made me bust out. He knows because I like him all the time.
Right. Well, I'll leave everyone with this. We won't answer this, but do you think it's a bigger strength for players that have positional flexibility or positional consistency? I feel like that's like a chicken and egg question. I'm not sure how to answer that. I think
depends on how you feel about Raheem Edwards, I guess.
I think LAFC's motto has been you get good players that have a good touch. They like the ball at their feet. They like to play. They like to run. They like to cover ground. And then you figure out where they best fit into your formation or how you want to do it. But you guys have been great. Thank you, defenders of the Banc. Thank you, Max Bretos. Thank you, Connor, for joining me.
Thank you, Vince. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Connor.
Appreciate you
No,
guys.
thank you, Max. I love
Thank you
guys.
all.
Yes, thank you all. This is awesome. We are going to do more of these. We think that there's going to be a lot more news. As Max said, we don't know for sure, but we keep hearing that things are happening. And now that the coach is in place, there's going to be a lot of movement. So we're going to try to do more of these live streams with you. So if you're not already, follow our YouTube. That's the best way to get information about when these are going to be live. But also follow us on all our social channels, because that's the best way when we put out info when we're going to do these. I think we're going to try to do it. Connor, can you commit to once a week?
We'll talk about that. Of course I can. We can do it once a week.
That's a no.
Connor and I will talk offline about that, but you guys have been great. Thank you so much for joining us. Let us know what you guys thought about this. Get out all of our social medias. You saw it on our names, our own social media handles. So let us know what you guys thought. And we'll do this again sometimes. Hopefully we'll have even more fun, and I hope you guys will all join me again.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye all.
Bye, guys. Follow at 110 Football. See you guys later.